remember when Trump called Georgia. He called the Secretary of State. He told them, I need to just find 11,780 votes. What did Georgia say? No. Well, Donald Trump called our governor, and he said, I just need a small change. I just need you to send me 5 congressional members. And what did our governor say? Sure. Give me a minute. Coming right up. While Texas are waiting for relief, Republican leaders are redrawing maps to silence voters, hijack our democracy.
Hi again, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock in the East. 1 hour ago, the Texas State House convened for another day of its special legislative session, but no business could be conducted as dozens of Texas Democrats left the state in protest yesterday, depriving Republicans of the quorum needed to move anything forward. More than 50 Texas state Democrats went to Chicago, New York, and Boston to fight back against Republicans' newly proposed congressional map. It would give the GOP a path to pick up 5 U.S. House seats in next year's midterm elections. It's a map that answers a direct request of Donald Trump's. Texas Democrats have called this move an attempt by Trump to rig the next election, as he currently reels from plunging approval ratings. The new congressional map put forward last week, NBC News reports, quote, would shift district lines in ways that would target current Democratic members of Congress in districts in and around Austin, Dallas, and Houston, as well as 2 already endangered Democrats representing South Texas districts that Trump carried last year. The Texas Democrats are showing they will not take this mid-cycle redistricting lying down. By leaving the state so the legislature does not have a full quorum, they hope to delay the work at the special session for weeks or longer. Here's Texas House Democrat Gene Wu in Chicago last night.
Governor Abbott is doing this in submission to Donald Trump, so that Donald Trump could steal these communities' power and voice. We will not be complicit in the destruction of our own communities. We're not here to play political games. We're here to demand an end to this corrupt process.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott, meanwhile, is using threats. He's threatening the lawmakers who left. In the last hour, he noted he has ordered the arrest of those he calls delinquent. He's talking about Texas House Democrats. He also has said that they, quote, may have committed felonies if they are soliciting funds to evade the fines they will incur under House rules. Texas House members face a $500 fine for each day they break quorum. In response to Governor Abbott's threats of expulsion and arrest, Wu, the Texas Democratic Caucus chair, simply said, quote, come and take it. This is not the first time Texas Democrats have left the state in order to try to stop the moves of their Republican counterparts. State Congressman Trey Martinez Fisher helped lead the action in 2021 in opposition to a bill that restricted voting rights. Here he is last night.
Republicans are stealing our democracy right before our very eyes. But guess what? Texas Democrats are here, and we have a message for Donald Trump. Not on our watch. That's right. We will not have our democracy taken on our watch.
That's where we start the hour. Texas State Representative John Busey, he is in Chicago with many of his colleagues who left Texas to help block the GOP redistricting plan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We just reported the news that Mr. Abbott has ordered the arrest of you and your colleagues. Are you aware of anyone being arrested as of yet?
No, I'm not. And I got to tell you, the second time this has happened to me, we're getting used to their bravado. But I think you showed the main point of what's going on here, where you showed Donald Trump's failing poll numbers. He's an incredibly unpopular president. He knows his policies are failing America, and he knows he can't win in the midterm elections. And that's why he's coordinating with Governor Abbott to steal 5 congressional seats in Texas, and Texas Democrats aren't going to stand for it. That's why we're here. We've run into the fight to protect the people of Texas. so their voice isn't stripped away from them by Governor Abbott and President Trump.
Is there any sign that the Republicans are backing down?
You know, we saw a Republican congressman in California file a bill today to say that we need to stop gerrymandering across this country. I couldn't agree with him more. And that's what we're hoping to do, is shine a light on what Greg Abbott and Donald Trump are trying to do. They can't win the midterm, so they're trying to steal them. We can't let that happen. This isn't a Republican or Democratic fight. This also isn't a Texas fight. This is an American fight, and we need everybody to step up and do their part to resist what Donald Trump and Greg Abbott are trying to do. I'm proud that the Republican in California did that. We must all be doing our part to stop gerrymandering everywhere that it stands, and we've got to do whatever we can to make sure that doesn't happen. Texans have a lot at stake that we need to be working for. We've got flood victims in Central Texas. We've got failing public schools because Governor Abbott refuses to support them. And we've got the worst health care in the nation. We could get to work to help the people of Texas instead of serving Donald Trump, which is what Greg Abbott's doing.
Well, let's deal with Texas for a second. I mean, what is it that makes Texans vote for people like Ted Cruz who leave the state during natural disasters, Republicans who have failed on the flood warning systems? That could be something that everyone would come together and work on in the wake of a horrific natural disaster and tragedy. I mean, what is it that makes Texans vote for Republicans anyway?
You know, Texas has some deep roots with the Republican Party, but I think actions like we're showing today is what leadership the Texans are looking for. They are fed up with the failures of Greg Abbott and Donald Trump. That's why they're trying to rig the elections. They know they're about to lose seats in Texas if they don't rig them. I think the people of Texas have woken up to their failures. They're looking for leadership, and they're seeing that Texas Democrats are delivering that leadership right now as we bring this fight to the entire country.
One of the reasons the California Republican might have made that statement is that I think California, if they did what the Texas Republicans are doing, could gerrymander Republicans out of their seats, right? I mean, do you support those efforts, fighting fire with fire?
Look, I don't support gerrymandering at all, but I also think if you're going to be at war, you got to fight fire with fire. So hopefully it doesn't come to that. We're trying to bring awareness to what's going on, and we need Greg Abbott to back down. We're going to kill this special session, and hopefully he will come to his senses. Remember that he serves the 31 million Texans, not the President of the United States, and that we will go, if we call another special session, it'll be to serve the people of Texas and help the Central Texas flood victims, not to do political games. So I don't want gerrymandering at all. We're going to resist it where we can. But I got to tell you, I'm proud that other governors are willing to fight fire with fire. And I also believe that they are willing to walk away from this fight if Donald Trump doesn't rig the game and if Greg Abbott doesn't support him and change the rules mid-decade.
What would get you on a plane back to Texas?
Look, let's take this. Let's kill this special session. Let's not put this power grab back on the table, and let's go back and help the people of Texas with Texas issues. That's what'll get me home, ready to fight for my constituents, for the 31 million Texans, and ultimately stop this charade of a power grab that will impact all 330 million Americans.
And joining us now, Democratic State Representative James Tallarico, who represents District 50, which includes much of Austin. He joins us now from Illinois. Why do you think that your fellow Democrats think that this is the best way to push back against Republicans that are trying to redistrict?
Well, usually state legislators adjust district boundaries at the beginning of a decade to account for population changes after a new census. Texas Republicans did that in 2021, 4 years ago, and they gerrymandered the map, just like both parties gerrymander in different states. And we didn't break quorum during that gerrymander. We're breaking quorum now because this is different. Trump has asked those same Texas Republicans to redraw the Texas maps to get him 5 more seats. They're doing it in the middle of the decade. This is like two teams coming out of the locker room at halftime of a football game, and the team that's ahead saying they want to change the rules in the second half to make sure they win. It's cheating, plain and simple. And if they're going to cheat, we're not going to play.
Okay, so what about the cheating, though? In an interview with The Bulwark earlier, you called on California Democrats to begin redrawing their state map immediately to counter Texas Republicans and what they're doing. Wouldn't it make it impossible for Democrats to have the high ground here and argue that this is not politically motivated?
If one side cheats, all bets are off. I would prefer that no states are gerrymandered. That's why I've put forward a bill in the Texas House of Representatives to have a citizen-led, independent redistricting process so that voters are choosing their politicians instead of politicians choosing their voters. But the Democratic Party cannot unilaterally disarm. When there's a bully on the playground, you don't lay down and play dead. You look that bully in the eye and you don't blink, because bullies are a lot weaker than you think. And I believe that if these other blue states threaten retaliation in response to Trump's power grab in Texas, that Texas Republicans may back off. They may walk away from the brink. And that way we could try to get to a place where every state has free and fair elections.
I don't know how likely that seems. They seem to be pushing their way through here. And your Republican colleagues in Texas say that their redistricting effort is fair, it's legal, and it's not unlike what Democrats have been doing in blue states. Here's the Republican chair of Texas's redistricting committee.
You got states like California and New York and Illinois that have these really large margins between the percentage of seats they have and the percentage of votes that they're getting. And Texas is underperforming in that. I have not seen any evidence that this map was racially based. What I have seen is evidence that this map was politically based. And that's totally legal, totally allowed, and totally fair.
So you did just say it earlier. Blue states gerrymander too. In fact, where you are in Illinois, there's an F grade from nonpartisan gerrymandering project. So you're saying that the difference is that they're doing it out of nowhere? What's the rationale to fight fire with fire here?
Yeah, exactly. As I mentioned, this is a process that is done at the beginning of the decade. But to do it in the middle of the decade and to do it at the direct request of the President of the United States, who's worried about losing his majority in Congress, that is not usual. That is egregious. It is brazen. And we can't become numb to this. I know that the media wants to make this into a typical R versus D thing, a blue team versus a red team. But I think we have to be honest that the Republican Party is led by a president who has shown a complete disregard and disdain for the peaceful transfer of power. And if he is able to hold on to power that goes unchecked, if he doesn't have a Congress that will hold him accountable, I'm worried he may not leave office in 2028. I hope that is just a fear, but I don't want to even go down that path. We have to have a free and fair midterm. But if Texas is rigged, if red states across the country become rigged ahead of those midterms, we're not going to be able to check power in this country. And that's incredibly dangerous for all of us, not just Democrats, but independents and Republicans too.
You and your colleagues have decamped there to Illinois. Are you concerned about the possibility, like the governor has threatened, of extradition, expulsion, even arrest?
Well, it's very consistent because by rigging these maps, they are trying to silence the voices of Texans to prevent them from electing representatives of their choice. Now Greg Abbott is saying he will literally remove people's representatives from office. So he's taken a page out of Donald Trump's authoritarian playbook. He does it with less charm and humor and charisma, but it is still the same dangerous playbook that President Trump uses. We have to stand up to it. We cannot become numb. We cannot treat this as business as usual. We have to stand up for the democratic process, for the American experiment, and for the people of this country.
Are you going to be watching that hearing at 4? Are you going to be watching to see what happens? That special
at 3,
session?
Yes. Yep, I'm going to be watching my colleagues on the House floor, and I pray that they can have the courage to stand up to Donald Trump. I know that my Republican friends are aware that this is bad precedent, that this is a dangerous move, but they lack the fortitude, the courage to stand up to the leader of their party and the President of the United States. He's trying to mess with Texas. And regardless of your political party, Texans must unite and resist that power and that overreach coming from the Oval Office.
This is a Texas-sized fight that is sizing up right now. Texas State Representative James Tallarico, thank you so much for being with us.
Here in New York, we will not stand on the sidelines with the timid souls on the sidelines who don't care, will not invest their heart and soul into this battle. This is a war. We are at war. And that's why the gloves are off, and I say, bring it on.
That is New York Governor Kathy Hochul earlier this hour, welcoming Texas Democratic lawmakers to her state after dozens of them fled the Lone Star State to block a vote on new congressional maps. The redistricting plan backed by President Trump could help Republicans pick up 5 more House seats in Texas, turning one state's fight into a national debate on political power. And now those Texas Democrats are getting assistance from several blue state governors while facing the threat of losing their seats or even arrest back home. And joining us now, House Minority Leader, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York. Leader Jeffries, thanks for being with us. Texas Governor Greg Abbott's now threatening felony charges. He's threatening to replace these state Democrats. What's your reaction to these threats?
Well, the Texas governor is a cowardly, fake bully. He was ordered by Donald Trump to convene a special session of the legislature in order to gerrymander the Texas congressional map and try to rig the midterm elections. This is taking place at a moment in time where just a few weeks ago, more than 100 people, including dozens of children, drowned to death in the Texas Hill Country as a result of that historic flooding and inaction or lack of preparation by Governor Abbott and Republicans in Texas. This is a cowardly move by Republicans in Texas, and I'm so appreciative of the courage, the character, and the conviction being shown by Texas Democrats from the legislature.
New York Governor Hochul, we just played there, calling this redistricting fight a war, saying this is a war. We are at war. Is that how you see it?
Democrats are going to respond from coast to coast and at all points in between to this effort to steal the midterm elections. Republicans are on the run right now. Donald Trump is deeply unpopular. Their one big ugly bill, which is now law, is deeply unpopular. It rips away health care from millions of Americans, steals food from the mouths of children. All of this is being done in terms of hurting everyday Americans so they can reward their billionaire donors. And they don't want to face the voters in a free and fair election. Perhaps Donald Trump and Mike Johnson and Republicans in Washington and in Texas thought that Democrats would not respond. We're going to respond forcefully, aggressively, and relentlessly.
What do you mean this is an effort to steal the midterm elections?
The Republicans in Texas already drew a gerrymandered map that is being challenged in court as we speak. But that's not good enough for them. So they now want to enact a separate map in the middle of the decade that takes 5 seats that are currently held from Democrats, including several in majority-minority communities around Austin, Houston, and Dallas, breaks them apart and tries to put them into Republican hands. These extremists want to be able to choose their voters as opposed to allowing the Texas voters to choose the people who should be privileged to represent them in Washington. It's theft. That's what gerrymandering in its extreme form is. And that's what Republicans are trying to do.
Is that the case then if Texas repercussions lead to California, lead to New York, lead to Illinois, potentially doing the same in those states to try to pick up more Democratic seats?
Great question. We're going to respond and respond forcefully. However, we also will operate within the constraints of the Voting Rights Act, which is not what Texas Democrats are doing. We need fair maps and one national standard. And that's why responses in Democratic states will be required. However, what was happening in Texas before and what is going on in Texas right now in terms of this second attempt to gerrymander the map, we believe violates the Voting Rights Act. You will not see that happen in Democratic states, but you will see governors and state legislatures and, of course, members of the House Democratic Caucus respond in kind. There is no unilateral disarmament. When we're in the middle of an all-out assault by Donald Trump and Republican sycophants on the economy, on health care, on our way of life, on law-abiding immigrant communities, on democracy itself.
You've called the Texas Republicans behind these redistricting efforts cowards, but this effort can be traced right up to the White House. The president has made no secret he wants this. Republicans want to cement control of your chamber for a long time. They control all levers of government right now. Realistically, how can you stop them?
Understand that Donald Trump is afraid of the fact that the voters are prepared, in our view, to reject this impotent House Republican majority that has done nothing to improve the quality of life for everyday Americans, done nothing to lower the high cost of living, nothing to give these hardworking American taxpayers across the country the ability to thrive when right now people can barely survive and Donald Trump and House Republicans are crashing the economy in real time. We're only 3 seats short from taking back the House. That is a historically close number. That is what has House Republicans and Donald Trump scared to death of what is going to happen in the midterm election. That's why we're seeing this extraordinary action in Texas. But you also are going to see an extraordinary response from Democrats coast to coast throughout the country and at all points in between.
We're just getting some new reporting as we speak right now from our White House team. And according to an administration official, there are no plans to use federal agents to go arrest these Texas lawmakers who left the state. The quote here, Governor Greg Abbott can handle his own state. If the Texas governor moves to charge or arrest these lawmakers, what will House Democrats do? Anything? Can you do anything?
That move will be challenged, of course, immediately in court, and we're going to collectively ensure that the Texas House Democrats are provided with all of the support that they need, and that, of course, includes ensuring this is the decent and right thing to do, ensuring that they can't be bullied unlawfully by Governor Abbott or the so-called Attorney General in Texas, or any of these other Republican sycophants who, instead of actually providing relief and recovery and resiliency efforts to the people who are suffering in the Texas Hill Country and beyond as a result of this historic flooding, they called this special session using the cover of that suffering because they want to jam this gerrymandered map down the throats of the people of Texas and the American people. And we're not going to allow it to happen in Texas to the best of our ability, and certainly will respond all across the country.
So leaving the state is an example of Democratic lawmakers there in Texas fighting back. But it comes at a time when a new AP poll shows many Democratic voters see your party as weak or ineffective. These are Democratic voters. We also saw that recent poll by the Wall Street Journal showing voters trust congressional Republicans over Democrats on handling most issues, from the economy to immigration to foreign policy, with Democrats getting their lowest rating in that poll in 35 years. Does any of that surprise you?
In that same Wall Street Journal poll, when they were asked, who would you prefer in control of the House of Representatives in November of 2026, the so-called generic ballot question, Democrats won in that very same Wall Street Journal poll. So certainly it's the case that we're in a more is more environment, and we have to continue to do more rallies, more press conferences, more protests, more sit-ins, more speeches on the House floor, more speeches on the Senate floor, more extraordinary actions, more site visits, more town hall meetings in Democratic districts, more town hall meetings in Republican districts. We're in a more is more environment. We have to continue to build upon that and earn the trust of the American people, including Democrats, who are understandably disappointed at the results of the November 2024 election and the situation that the country finds itself in. But our view is, do not be discouraged, do not be disheartened, do not be dismayed. We're going to continue to show up and stand up and speak up. We're going to end this national nightmare in America, and we're going to continue our country's march toward a more perfect union.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
But this isn't the first time Democratic lawmakers in the Lone Star State have left in protest of their Republican opposition in the State House. In 2021, they fled to Washington, D.C. to deny Republicans the quorum needed to pass restrictive new laws on voting. Among those Democrats who helped in organizing the walkout was a young first-term Democratic state representative named Jasmine Crockett. The civil rights lawyer went on to win a seat in Congress and has been one of the most prominent national voices against the GOP's redistricting efforts. And joining us now is the lady herself, Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas. Congresswoman, thanks so much for being with us. And so you're a veteran of this 2021 effort that definitely, it shaped a lot of headlines, but at the end of the day, the national conversation was stoked about voting rights legislation, but nothing happened nationally. What's different at this moment?
Yeah, so thank you for talking about what happened in 2021. I was listening in as you were talking to the Rev, and you mentioned the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, as well as we were fighting to get the Freedom to Vote Act passed. Ultimately, obviously, this was a decision that came down to whether or not Congress was going to do so. But at the end of the day, the story that most people don't talk about is the fact that this terrible voter suppression bill actually got a little better. Did it get good? Absolutely not. But they absolutely wanted to take away souls to the polls. There was a benefit to shining a light on what it was that they were trying to do in the dark in Texas. So unfortunately, we've seen our numbers fall now that they have these voter restrictions in place. But I do think it's important for us to have the conversation around the fact that this is bigger than Texas. This isn't just about the 5 seats in Texas. This is about a power grab. It is about basically setting the tone for what Donald Trump will try to do throughout this country so that he can suppress the voices of black and brown folk just so that he can stay in power.
Congresswoman Danny Savalas, you organized a walkout yourself in 2021. Are you concerned that repeated walkouts could backfire politically, painting Democrats as obstructionist rather than standing up for voting rights?
Absolutely not. Unfortunately, as you also heard from the Rev, there are so many people that feel like the Democrats have not been fighting hard enough. Well, I am here to tell you, as you've already stated, I have been a loud voice of opposition to this regime thus far. We have some of the best fighters that you can find right there in the state of Texas. And so now it will be interesting to see some of those new young voices that will be introduced to the nation as they talk about why it was so important to do this and deny the quorum as they continue to go after our voices in a majority minority state, and they are continuing to suppress them systemically. And we know that the Supreme Court now is going to take up a Section 2 case, and we know that Section 2 is basically the only section we really have left of the Voting Rights Act.
Congresswoman, hi, it's Molly Jong-Fast. I was wondering if you could talk about what there's a lot of stuff going on in the Texas House and the State House, a lot of drama. We see there's going to be drama with this Senate race, the Cornyn Senate race. The Republicans are actually really fighting with themselves, too. I wonder if you could talk to us. Yeah, I mean, just unbelievable stuff. I wonder if you could talk to us about sort of what's happening there and a little bit about your the other people in the Texas House who are, how are they feeling heading to Chicago? Have you been talking to them?
Yeah, so about my former colleagues, I am so excited. They worked really hard, and unfortunately, it is so clear, just like the Republicans on the federal level, they are not interested in doing what's right. They are interested in serving one person, and that's Donald Trump. Unfortunately, they could care less what their constituents say. We know that they had all of these town halls, and I'm calling them town halls because they didn't have the bill. And we know that the vast majority of the people that came out said, don't do this. And then we know that they only had one hearing on the bill, and the vast majority of the people, over 400, registered to testify against this bill, and they only had 48 hours notice to come during a business day to get to Austin and to testify, but they showed up anyway. But when you talk about the dysfunction within the party, I'm sure you have seen the headlines from my friend from Georgia as she's now come to the realization that maybe the Republicans aren't big fans of women in and she's coming to these other realizations about the Republican Party, I think it is something to be said that there's MAGA and then there's Republicans. And I think that's what you're even seeing that's going to play out in this Senate race. I will be honest with you and tell you that Senator Cornyn is a Republican. I will be honest with you also and tell you that Ken Paxton is MAGA through and through. We're talking about someone who had been under felony indictment in the state of Texas for almost a decade. In fact, he was indicted before the felon in the White House was indicted. We're talking about someone who had been under federal investigation. We're talking about someone who was impeached by his own party and then was not convicted as his wife sat in the jury on the Senate side. And now she has said, I want to divorce you. And she's stating that it's biblical reasons. And I guess it had nothing to do with that fake Uber account that he had when he was going to see his mistress that was a part of his impeachment trial. Let me tell you, there is drama on top of drama, and there definitely are no family values whatsoever to be found. And now we know that this same attorney general has decided that he wants to threaten these lawmakers because they are the real criminals in the state of Texas, not the guy who should be behind bars, but the lawmakers who have decided that in a majority minority state, they should have districts that are reflective of the people so that they can actually be in alignment with our Constitution, because that's exactly what the 15th Amendment was about.
I want your take on the direction that this redistricting fight kind of tells us the country may be going. And we understand, we've had conversations with a lot of Democrats. We had Beto on last night talking about the sort of need to fight fire with fire. So if that means California needs to take certain steps, New York, whatever, then Democrats have a responsibility, he and many others feel right now, to do that. But big picture for our country, if Texas goes this way, other Republican-led states try to copy them, and then Democrats run and do their own gerrymanders, where do we land as a country, given just the cultural and political polarization that we already have? If people's representation is taken from them in this way, where do we all end up, you think?
Yeah, I don't know where we're going. But right now, all I know is that we've got to do everything that we can to save this country, because right now it feels like we're going to hell, and it doesn't seem like we have a way back. You know, I actually had to leave a congressional delegation trip where we were in, I was in London at the time with the Judiciary Committee, and it is very frightening to see how far, how much influence this terrible regime is having, not just in this country, but on other countries. It is also terrible that our friends don't know if we can be good friends. We know that Canada is upset with us. We know that Mexico is upset with us. So the only thing that I know is that democracy is hanging by a thread, if that much. And so I do believe that we need to do everything that we can in this moment. And ultimately, the history books will write kindly about us. And, well, we'll see what they write about the other side. Ultimately, where we go is a matter of Democrats at the heart of who we are. We believe in fairness. We believe in equity. We don't think that those are bad words. And so I think that what you'll see is that if we can get things back on track and we can get the basics back in there. You talk about the Voting Rights Act. Listen, this was reauthorized in a bipartisan way ever since it was signed into law by a Texan in the 60s. It's only now that we are debating whether or not every single citizen should have equal access to representation. Now that is a debate. Now that we've started to see that we are getting more colorful. That's the same reason that we've decided that people should be rounded up and thrown away in random cages and treated as if they are lesser than. It is time to get some humanity back in this country. It is time for us to finally be the beacon of hope that we historically have been for the rest of the world. And if this is what it takes, then this is what it takes. We are in a battle, and we are in a battle, as Joe Biden said when he ran, for the soul of this country. We are fighting for better. And ultimately, once we get the adults in the room to fix everything, as Democrats typically do, then that is when we will hopefully get some guardrails around our democracy and fix the system once and for all.
Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, thank you so much for joining us.
Republicans in Texas yesterday released the first draft of a new congressional map aimed at picking up 5 seats in next year's midterms. Texas Governor Greg Abbott added redistricting to the special session agenda at the urging of President Trump and his political team. Republicans currently control 25 of the 38 congressional districts in Texas. Under the new maps, the President Trump would have carried 30 of 38 seats, all by more than 10 points. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is in Texas meeting with Democrats as they weigh their options on how to fight the redistricting efforts, which could include leaving the state. Jeffries is supposed to hold a news conference today at the state capitol in Austin. Meanwhile, the Texas Tribune has new reporting that California Governor Gavin Newsom has told aides he will move forward with a plan to redraw his state's congressional lines to install more Democrats if Texas Republicans pass their own updated map. Let's bring in MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle and politics reporter for Semaphore, Dave Weigel. Dave's latest reporting is titled Democrats Struggle Against Trump-Waged Redistricting Battle. So, Dave, let's talk about exactly what's happening right now in Texas and how unusual this is. They usually redistrict maps all over the country after the census every 10 years. This taking place right in the middle of a decade, really from pressure applied by President Trump.
That's the part that's unusual. The Supreme Court, actually starting in Texas in 2003, clarified that states can redistrict, gerrymander whenever they want. It doesn't need to be right after the census. And what is unique this time is how little pretense there is that this is about anything but helping Trump get more seats. And so this started with Harmeet Dillon at the DOJ sending Texas a letter and saying, we have civil rights concerns about some of the majority-minority districts that were drawn in 2021. But listening to the Republicans defending this and posting about on social media, they are describing this, the Republicans in Austin, as giving Trump 5 more seats. And talking to Republicans in Indiana, Missouri, other places where they have the power to draw more seats if they want to, that is how they phrase it. It is not, we are restoring the justice that was denied to us by the previous map, or this is going to better represent these constituents. It is, we want Trump to have more seats. He deserves more seats. We need to stop the left from taking power. And that's what the position Democrats are put in there is, do they want to defend the idea of independent commissions or something else? Or they just want to say this is tit for tat. We cannot allow them to turn the country into, the comparison I hear the most often is Hungary.
Right. And Mike Barnicle, we're talking about this in 2025. This has been going on for such a long time. And, you know, whenever some people have come up to me in the past and asked, why are things so different now in Washington than they were before? One of the first reforms I talk about is the ending of gerrymandering. I'm not sure how you get from here to there, but it's absolutely critical because it started in the 90s when they started using computers to redistrict, and they could draw lines perfectly to make sure that if you're in Florida 1, you get all the Republicans. If you're in Florida 2, you get all the Democrats, and you can vote with your party 90, 95, 98% of the time. And a primary win is as good as a general election win. Once you get past the primary, it's over. And so that's why you have so many House members going to the extremes. And they could, whether Republicans are in charge or Democrats are in charge, that's been the case for years now. I mean, we have to figure out a way to end gerrymandering. It would make such a huge difference. Imagine if somebody's, instead of in a 90-10 district or an 80-20 district, they're in a 50-50 district or a 55-45 district. They actually have to listen to everybody in their district. They have to actually do what's best for the country and then go back in their town hall meetings. And instead of talking to people who are 95% Democratic or 95% Republican, they're talking to a lot of independents. They're talking to some Republicans. They're talking to some Democrats. And they're talking about what makes America best, not what makes a party or a president strongest.
Yeah, but Joe, you just used the phrase, what's best for the country, that they think of what's best for the country. I don't know that anyone on either side of the aisle, Republican or Democrat, is more or less thinking about what's best for the country, other than now uniquely what's best for us as a party, what's best for me for my reelection race, what's best for me in order to avoid a primary. And Dave Weigel, the idea of this going forward in such a public way, I mean, they're not trying to hide anything. What role will the courts play, and when will the courts play it, if they play a role at all?
Well, Democrats have the option of suing if the maps are put into effect. They would argue that because this map is going to delete some majority-minority seats, that it's a violation of the Voting Rights Act. But look at the courts in Texas. Look where this would go. It would go through state courts, kicked up to the Fifth Circuit. You're not likely to find a panel of judges who will agree with them. There is a risk that gets kicked up to a 6-3 SCOTUS that says, actually, we've read the Voting Rights Act again and don't think that you need majority-minority districts. Now, there are Democrats, Ruben Gallego in Arizona is one of them, who say it's time to just give up on the majority-minority district idea altogether, because Democrats should be in the business of maximizing how many seats they can win. Go back to 1992, the first time that the South was redrawn where there were more safe black districts, Democrats lost some seats because there were safe seats in places like Birmingham, like Tallahassee, or I should say like Jacksonville, and then they were redrawn away from more competitive seats that Democrats could win. This could be a transformation in how both parties talk about it, moving away from the idea that it's about voters and fairness or about competitiveness, and it is about getting partisan advantage whenever you have power.
And Susan, let's go further on that point. It could be like an arms race here, because some Democrats are suggesting, well, if you're going to do it in Texas, we could do it in some blue states. New York has talked about it, as well as California. And there was one map floating around yesterday that would show a redistricting of California, not an unrealistic one, that would basically wipe Republicans off the map entirely. It would just be nothing but Democratic-controlled districts. We're going to a new and I would argue dangerous place here.
Of course, we know that some of these blue states, California and New York included, have more legal difficulties in doing kind of the freewheeling, we just want to do it so we can do it, redistricting that we're about to see in Texas. But I wonder what voters actually think about this new political arms race, because the times when referenda have gotten onto state ballots to try to get rid of some gerrymandering, to try to bring some common sense to the way districts are drawn, they've done pretty well. And we've seen several states move toward less partisan redistricting in a way that they like. Now, voters elected this Texas governor and this Texas legislature that's about to do this. So I wonder, and maybe Dave has a view on this, I wonder what voters in Texas think about what's about to happen there.
There has not been a lot of polling specifically in Texas yet, but you're right that when this is presented to voters and the question is, do you want politicians to draw districts where they can never lose, that loses. So the way that Republicans beat an anti-gerrymandering measure in Ohio last year, it helped that Donald Trump was on the ballot, but they had the power to rewrite the language for the ballot initiative, and they wrote it so that it sounded like it was pro-gerrymandering. They said it was going to take taxpayer-funded money and let bureaucrats draw things so that you wouldn't have a voice in this. When it is presented as you don't really get to choose who represents you, one party is going to be in power forever, yes, voters do reject that. But it's state to state. Michigan, for example, you can put a ballot initiative in front of voters. Democrats did that. Got nonpartisan redistricting, hard to undo. Colorado, hard to undo. And talking to Democrats, my colleague and I, Burgess Everett, talking to Democrats this week, Democrats from states that passed these independent commissions were reluctant to say, let's throw it out and let's have perhaps every 2 years trench warfare where we try to redraw the maps and get new districts. Yes, the ability is there, and voters don't like this, but that's the point of gerrymandering. Voters in North Carolina keep voting for Democratic governors, and Republicans have drawn the state as such that they're basically unable to elect a Democratic legislature.
Yeah, and John Heilemann, just so those that haven't followed this closely understand exactly the consequences of this, well, take a look at Wisconsin, which after the 2010 election started gerrymandering their districts in Wisconsin to favor Republicans every way possible. It got to a point where you would have state legislative races are the tallies that would be about 50-50. And yet Republicans would control 65% of the state legislature. I mean, it is so grossly unrepresentative, so unfair. It's a sort of thing, it seems to me, that if we're going to do this, we need to have a national pact. We've got to figure out how to do this nationally, because we all know what's coming. More and more voters every year becoming independents. And this sort of gerrymandering only seals the fate for Democrats and Republicans alike.
Right. And Joe, to the point, I mean, it really is this kind of war of all against all that we're headed towards here. And it's one of the main ways in which the Trump era has changed our politics. This consideration of there are the legal quandaries and difficulties because of the independent commissions that got set up in a lot of these Democratic states. But the pressure coming on Democrats who are frustrated with the lack of fight that they see in their leadership. So the pressure coming on driven by people like Beto O'Rourke and by large parts of the given voice by Beto O'Rourke, but driven by the Democratic base that says, California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, these are all places where the pressure is now on, and you have Hakeem Jeffries now getting involved in this, kind of taking increasingly the view that, we are suckers if we don't try to in some ways mimic what Donald Trump and Republicans have done, which is to basically say this is not about anything other than political power. And Jonathan said a second ago that it was disturbing. I think where this is headed is to a very ugly place. But again, there are a lot of Democrats who say we're already in that ugly place, and we're either going to do unilateral disarmament here or stick with what they see as unilateral disarmament in the form of these nonpartisan commissions, or we're just going to get swamped. We're going to get shellacked, or we're going to get played for fools. The logic of this is leading to a really ugly place, but it is also a kind of compelling logic when the other side is behaving in the way that it's behaving.
Yeah, one Democrat in the New York Times this morning say we don't have access to the high road anymore. Right. We've got to fight on their terms because this is how it's happening. All right, it's 7:04. It's Dave Weigel. Thank you. His latest reporting available online now.